I came home early from my girls' trip to surprise my husband and overheard him on the phone. Marriage is a complete nightmare, bro. I wake up every day regretting my decision. I was sitting in the bathroom, the hot water from the shower running steadily. Not because I needed to bathe, but to muffle the sound of my sobs. Outside, the whole house was drowned in silence. Connor probably thought I was unwinding after a long day, but I was trembling, crying, trying to write down everything that had just happened. We had just celebrated our 3rd wedding anniversary with a small ceremony, attended by close friends in both our families. Connor cried while reading his vows and said I was the best thing that had ever happened to him. And at that moment, I believed him. I believed his tears. I believed the way he held my hand. I believed every single word he said. After the ceremony, I planned a trip to Nashville with 3 of my best friends. A girls-only getaway filled with spa appointments, wine tastings, and trendy rooftop bars we'd seen all over social media. But things didn't go as planned. One of my friends got food poisoning. Another had an urgent work issue, and we decided to cut the trip short. I wasn't upset. In fact, I felt oddly happy. It gave me the chance to come home early and surprise Connor. I picked up his favorite food, grabbed a few cans of the craft beer he'd been obsessing over, and even smiled to myself the whole drive back, imagining the look of surprise and joy on his face when he saw me at the door. I entered through the garage using my personal code, stepping inside quietly like some undercover agent about to stage an emotional reunion. The house was quiet, except for Connor's voice drifting down from upstairs, probably gaming or on the phone with someone. I set the food down on the kitchen counter and started heading upstairs, planning to sneak up behind him like I used to do. But as I reached the staircase, I froze. His tone was different. It wasn't cheerful or light like usual. Every word hit me like a blade. He was complaining about the marriage, about me, about my family, about the life he'd pretended to love. I stood there for what felt like forever, long enough for everything I'd believed in to fall apart, one sharp word at a time. Everything I had trusted, everything I had built turned out to be just a stage. And I wasn't even a co-star. I was a prop. I walked back down without making a sound. I didn't cry. I didn't call his name. I simply picked up the food, the surprise that was supposed to bring us closer, and walked out as if I had never entered. I sat in my car for nearly 2 hours. Mascara streaked down my face. My hands were shaking. I couldn't stop them. At one point, an elderly woman walking by tapped on the window and asked if I needed help. I lied. I told her my dog had gone missing. That was the first lie in what would become a series of days where I had to live 2 versions of myself. One, the wife returning from a trip, smiling like everything was fine. And the other, a woman who had just lost the one thing she thought she could always believe in. When I still believed I was living in a happy marriage, I used to think there was nothing more wonderful than escaping the city for a few days, stepping away from the endless meetings, the responsibilities of being a wife, just to be myself for a little while. I had 3 close friends, Scarlett, Tina, and Monica. We met during our freshman year in the dorms, and even though life had taken each of us in different directions, we made it a point to keep one tradition alive: meeting up at least once a year for a girls-only trip. No husbands, no kids, no work. Just us. This time, our destination was Nashville. The first day went by almost perfectly. We went to the spa, got hot stone massages, then had dinner at an Italian restaurant where Scarlett ordered the most expensive bottle of wine on the menu. I sent Connor a few pictures: a glowing blue cocktail, a half-eaten slice of pizza, and a fluffy pillow on our hotel bed. He only replied briefly, "Have fun. Miss you." I smiled, feeling warm inside, thinking how lucky I was to have a husband who wasn't the jealous type. But then, on the second day, things started to fall apart. Scarlett had stomach pain early in the morning. At first, we thought it was just a hangover, but when she started throwing up and running a mild fever, we knew something was wrong. Monica took her to the ER while Tina and I stayed back to sort things out at the hotel. That afternoon, Scarlett called to say the doctor confirmed it was food poisoning, likely from the spicy chicken place we'd eaten at the night before. Tina, meanwhile, got called in urgently by her company. She works in marketing for a global brand, so even on vacation, she carries her laptop. But this time, it wasn't one of those light emergencies. She spent the entire day on Zoom calls with her boss, clients, and the creative team trying to put out fires. By the evening, I was the only one left in the room, sipping the last of the wine Scarlett had left behind, staring out from the balcony into a dark, quiet street below. Faint country music drifted up from somewhere in the distance. A dreamy trip had turned into one of the loneliest moments I'd felt in a long time. I scrolled through the photos we'd taken the day before and a pile of unread work messages. Connor hadn't messaged me again since that morning. I collapsed onto the bed, eyes fixed on the ceiling. I wasn't sad exactly. I just felt empty. Like I had been overly excited about something that no longer felt real. I had looked forward to laughter, late-night talks, hugs over silly jokes. But in the end, it was just me and a silence that felt far too heavy. The next morning, Scarlett was still in the hospital getting fluids. Tina was knee-deep in meetings with her team. I woke up early, sipped a quiet cup of coffee, and suddenly a thought came to me. Maybe I should just go home early? Not because I was bored, but because I thought of Connor. He always said he couldn't sleep when I was away. He'd send me pictures of himself and our dog curled up on the couch looking like a sad puppy. Once, he even made a short video joking, "What am I supposed to eat now that you're gone? Instant noodles?" I felt this wave of tenderness and excitement. I wanted to surprise him. I wouldn't tell him I was coming. I'd grab his favorite food, stop by the craft beer store near our house for that IPA he'd been obsessed with, and quietly unlock the garage. I imagined myself walking in, smiling, and watching his face light up when he saw me. That image was so clear, so comforting, so simple. It felt like love. So I packed up my bags, left a little note for Scarlett and Tina, and booked the earliest flight back home that day. I didn't tell Connor anything because I wanted the surprise to be real. The whole way from the airport, I kept imagining his face. His smile, the hug, the "You're really here?" moment. There was something warm and almost innocent about the thought. I stopped by his favorite takeout place and ordered the exact nachos he always craved. Then I swung by the liquor store and picked up 4 cans of fruity IPA he once said tasted like summer. My heart felt lighter. It reminded me of our early days when making each other happy felt so effortless. I got home around mid-afternoon. Sunlight was hitting the front lawn just right. The fence still hadn't been repainted, even though I'd reminded him 2 weeks ago. The mailbox was stuffed with flyers. I entered through the garage with my code, quietly, like a thief in her own home. The house was still. I walked in through the kitchen, placed the food and beer on the counter, and heard Connor's voice from upstairs. His tone was even, like he was on a call. I smiled to myself, thinking I'd sneak up and hug him from behind like I used to. I tiptoed up the stairs, but then I stopped. I can't explain what exactly made me freeze. Maybe it was his tone. It wasn't warm, it wasn't playful, it was annoyed, tired. I listened closely, and in just a few seconds, my entire world began to crack. I don't remember how long I stood there on that staircase. But when I finally turned around and walked back down, I was no longer the same person. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even confront him. I just picked up the bag of food and beer and walked out of that house as if no wife had ever lived there. I drove to a parking lot near the airport and sat in my car for almost 2 hours. No music, no calls, not even a tear. Just silence and my mascara running down my face. An elderly woman walked past, knocked on my window, and asked if I needed help. I smiled and told her my dog of 3 years had just gone missing. A harmless little lie, spoken so gently. But inside, a storm was tearing through my entire being. I drove around the city for hours, trying to sort through my thoughts, But the more I tried, the more tangled they became. So many years of love. So many moments when I believed in his smile. Suddenly, it all felt like props in a perfectly scripted play, and I had been cast in the lead role without ever knowing. I returned home at the time I was supposed to. Connor still had no idea I'd come back early. When I stepped through the door, he smiled brightly, pulled me into a hug like he always did. I smiled back, kissed his cheek gently, and felt my stomach twist. I had loved this man. I had once believed that if anything bad ever happened to me, he would be the one to stand between me and the storm. But now, I lay beside him every night, knowing that every morning he wakes up regretting the fact that he married me. The 5 days that followed were the longest of my life. I still cooked. I still cuddled next to him during movie nights. I still asked how his day was at work. But every answer, every hug, every smile from him made me shiver. I could no longer tell what was real and what was a lie. And then I began to change. I told no one. Not Scarlett, not Monica, not even my parents, especially not my dad. He loved Connor like a son. He once said Connor was the ideal son-in-law. Humble, respectful, never flashy, and most importantly, not someone who would ever take advantage of our family's wealth. But if he ever learned the truth, I think it would break his heart. So I started watching. I noticed how Connor talked on the phone. How he hung up quickly when I walked in. How he tucked his phone under his pillow at night. How he avoided my eyes whenever I asked harmless questions like, "Anything exciting lately?" I checked the bank accounts. In the past 3 months, Connor had made a series of small but consistent cash withdrawals, $200 to $300 each time, but so regular it felt intentional. Seemingly minor, but when totaled, it added up to thousands. When I casually asked about it, he laughed and said it was just for miscellaneous things. I nodded, said nothing more, and quietly started moving money into a private account he couldn't access. A little at a time, just enough to avoid suspicion. I reached out to a lawyer, but not someone connected to the family. I asked Loretta, my most trusted friend, to refer me to someone independent, someone discreet, someone safe. I changed all my personal account passwords, set up 2-step verification, and scheduled a meeting with a financial advisor to reassess everything that was in my name and everything shared with Connor. Every night I wrote things down, every detail I noticed, every word he said, every expense he made. I took screenshots, saved messages, backed everything up to an external drive and hid it somewhere he would never think to look. And then, slowly, he started to sense that something had changed. One time, I deliberately left a browser tab open on my laptop showing my personal bank account. Connor saw it. He didn't say anything, just stared for a long moment, then walked away. He started calling me more, texting, "Are you okay?" in the middle of the day. One time, he even brought coffee to my office, something he had never done in our entire marriage. He thought he was holding on to me with small acts of kindness. What he didn't realize was that I had already left. I just hadn't walked out the door yet. I started testing him, gently, subtly, not to provoke, but to confirm my suspicions. One morning, I left a printed copy of our joint bank transactions on the corner of my desk. It listed every recent withdrawal he had made. I didn't say anything, didn't leave a note, just left it there, as if I had printed it and forgotten to file it. When I got home that night, the papers had been moved. Not much, but just enough for me to know. He had read them. That evening, Connor called me 27 times in 1 hour. I didn't answer. When I finally called back, he was out of breath, panicked. He asked if something had happened, if I was mad at him, if someone in my family was sick. I told him I'd left my phone in the glove compartment while shopping at Target. Nothing had happened. Everything was fine. He was silent for a moment, but I could hear the fear in his voice, no matter how hard he tried to hide it. He told me he loved me, and I replied, "I love you too." in a voice so calm, I barely recognized it as my own. That was the biggest lie I had ever told. From that day on, everything started to shift more quickly. Connor began acting strangely. He woke up earlier, checked my emails when he thought I wasn't looking. One time, I walked out of the bathroom to find my iPad open to a search page titled, "How to Divorce Without Disclosing Assets." I didn't laugh because it was funny. I laughed because everything was unfolding exactly as I had expected. I continued playing the role of the normal wife. But quietly, I started clearing out our filing cabinet, slowly taking out important documents and family keepsakes. I told Connor I needed some props for a friend's product shoot. A harmless little lie. I also started meeting with Loretta more often. She was the only one who knew everything. We met at a little cafe near my office, pretending to talk about work while we were actually strategizing. Loretta even helped me set up a secret email account where I stored evidence. Screenshots, message logs, notes from our conversations. I knew I had to be sure. When this ended, I didn't just want a divorce. I needed an exit, a clean escape. One where he couldn't drag me down with him, and one where my family wouldn't suffer collateral damage. I reviewed every contract, every shared asset. I met with my lawyer and laid everything out. She was sharp, calm, and brutally honest. She told me I had more leverage than I realized. What Connor had done, financial deceit, manipulation, hiding funds, could be considered intentional fraud. That gave me strength. But what gave me more strength was the clarity I gained every time I looked into the eyes of the man who once said he loved me. One night, while I was cooking dinner, he came into the kitchen holding a bouquet of flowers. He'd never brought flowers without a reason. The last time was our first wedding anniversary. I asked, "What's the occasion?" He smiled and said, "I just wanted to make you happy." I smiled too, took the bouquet in my hands, and right in that moment, I knew. I was leaving. Not because the gesture was bad, but because it came too late. Too late for everything I had once hoped from him. I kept tracking his financial activity. I discovered regular transfers to a fixed location in his hometown. No memo, no explanation. I had a strong feeling he was sending money to someone. Maybe family, maybe someone else. Then one day, I found another phone tucked inside his nightstand drawer. No lock. But there was a Post-it stuck to the back with a scribbled 6-digit number. I had tried the number. It worked. The phone had one contact only, saved under the name D. The message history spanned months. Vague conversations about long-term planning, holding position, and just 2 more years. One message read, "The vow renewal was the final step before we moved to phase 2. I didn't feel hurt anymore. I felt disgusted. I took pictures of everything. Then carefully placed the phone back in the drawer, exactly as I had found it. That night, as I was getting ready for bed, Connor came up behind me. He wrapped his arms around me and buried his face in my hair. He whispered, "I feel like I'm losing you, and I don't even know why." I didn't turn around. I just said, "Maybe I've just been working too much." He went quiet. I heard his sigh. But I had nothing left to give. I had already given him my trust, my love, and the quiet sacrifices I never once asked him to repay. But to him, all of it was just fuel to push himself further in the grand performance of his life. I didn't cry, because I had no more tears left for him. And I knew one thing for certain. When I left, I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't accuse. I wouldn't even say goodbye. I would leave behind just one thing. Silence. The silence of a woman who knows she deserves better, and who will never again play background to someone else's script. That Sunday, Connor suggested we have dinner at my parents' house. He said it had been a while since we all sat together, that he missed the warm family atmosphere, especially my father. I nodded in agreement, as if it were nothing unusual. But deep down, I knew this would be our last dinner as husband and wife. I had planned for this day weeks in advance. The dinner was just the opening act. The real confrontation would happen afterward in my father's study, with everyone present. Me, Connor, my parents, and our family's lawyer, Mr. Bradshaw, a man I had trusted since childhood. Dinner took place in a strange atmosphere. Connor was unusually cheerful. He complimented my mother's new curtains, praised my father's grilled meat, and even acted enthusiastic when my younger sister talked about her internship. He tried to appear close and cheerful, but his eyes betrayed a barely concealed tension. I didn't say much. I just observed. Every forced smile, every nervous glance, every overly eager response. It was all part of a poorly written play, and I was the only one in the room who knew the full script. After dinner, I suggested we move to my father's study to discuss a few important matters. Connor hesitated for a second, but eventually nodded. We sat around the large, round wooden table. My father poured tea. Mr. Bradshaw opened his briefcase and placed a thick folder on the table, calmly but with undeniable weight. I looked at Connor, steadying my breath. My father began, "Before we get into the details, Connor, is there anything you'd like to say?" Connor frowned slightly and shook his head. "Everything's fine. We've just been busy lately, that's all." My father nodded, expression unreadable. Mr. Bradshaw opened the file. The first few pages were bank statements, showing multiple regular withdrawals with no clear purpose. Then came screenshots of messages between Connor and someone named D, and finally, a transcript and recording of the phone call I overheard the day I came back early from Nashville. Connor went pale. He tried to speak, but no words came out. His eyes darted around the room, searching for something, anything to cling to. Like a drowning man looking for a life raft, I looked at him. Calmer than I had ever been. Maybe you misunderstood," Connor stammered. "That phone call, it was just me venting to a friend. Everyone says dumb things sometimes." I cut him off, softly but firmly. "You called our marriage a nightmare. You called me your money wife. You said the only reason you stayed was because of my family's money, and that your vows at the anniversary ceremony were nothing but Oscar-worthy acting. Tell me, was any of that true?" He was speechless. For a few long seconds, no one said a word. Then my mother finally spoke, her voice shaking with anger. "Son, how long have you been lying to us?" Connor turned toward her quickly, trying to put on the sincerity I used to fall for. "No, Mom, it's not like that. I love Natalie. This is all just a big misunderstanding." My mother let out a bitter laugh. Connor went silent. The color slowly drained from his face. Mr. Bradshaw stepped in. "We have enough evidence to prove that Connor didn't marry Natalie out of love, but for personal financial gain. This violates the honesty clause in the prenuptial agreement. And with what we've collected, we will proceed to remove Connor from all trust funds and any claims related to the family's assets." Connor looked at me. No longer pretending, no longer fighting back. Just raw, exposed panic and desperation in his eyes. "You're really leaving me?" he asked. I didn't respond right away. I looked at him for a long time. Then I nodded. "It's not just about that phone call," I said quietly. "It's that for 3 whole years, I lived with someone who never existed. The man I loved was never real." Connor sank into his chair, both hands clutching his temples. I watched his shoulders tremble. Maybe from shock. Maybe because for the first time in his life, he had lost control of the narrative. My father said nothing more. He stood up, opened a drawer in his cabinet, and placed another file on the table. The divorce papers. Everything had already been prepared. I had signed. The lawyer had reviewed every clause. Now all that was left was to hand them over. Connor stared at the documents like they were a loaded weapon. He didn't speak. He didn't object. He didn't shout. I stood up, calmly but with finality. I looked at him one last time and said, "I'm not walking away from our marriage. You did that the moment you decided to treat me like your ticket to a better life. Starting today, I'm taking myself back." I walked out of the room and closed the door behind me, as if ending the final act of a play I'd been forced to star in for far too long. That night, I didn't go home. I had already packed my things in advance and rented a small apartment downtown, just for myself. A space where I could finally breathe again after all those suffocating days of living a lie. My mom texted me all night, saying she couldn't believe she had once adored someone like Connor. My dad was quieter, but the next morning he sent me a short email. "You're the strongest woman I've ever known." I didn't cry. I just took a deep breath and started settling into my new space. I hung pictures on the walls, arranged my books, picked out bedding in colors I liked. Without needing to ask anyone if it matched the curtains, Connor texted too. At first, there were apologies, then explanations, then begging. Eventually, anger, threats, silence. I didn't respond. I had read enough, heard enough, understood enough. No word from him meant anything anymore. The following week, I met Loretta again. We sat at our usual cafe. She raised her glass of wine and said, "You made it out. Now go live." And I smiled. Not the tight, forced smile I'd worn for weeks, but a real one. Light. Free. The kind that comes only after you've walked through a storm and come out whole. A few weeks later, I heard Connor had moved out of the city. He left the house to me, just like we agreed, and disappeared from all official communication. I didn't ask where he went. I didn't need to know. His disappearance, was my reward for all the silence I had endured. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just tired. Tired of pretending to be a happy wife. Tired of holding together something that was never real. Tired of once believing that love alone could save a marriage. I was wrong, but now I know. Mistakes don't kill you. They make you stronger. I once thought the most painful moment in a marriage was discovering betrayal, but it wasn't. The most painful moment was realizing the person you loved never truly existed. When it ended, I didn't cry. I just quietly gathered the ruins of that marriage and walked away. I started writing again. Not reports, not emails, just writing for me. I wrote about 3 years of marriage, not to accuse, but to remind myself that I survived, that I made it through, by using my mind, my strength, and the belief that I deserved better. I posted that story on an anonymous forum for women who had been through heartbreak. No names, no faces, just a woman telling the truth about how she found herself again after realizing the love she received was never real. To my surprise, hundreds of comments came pouring in. Women from everywhere shared their pain, their solidarity, even their gratitude. Some had been used. Some were the plan B in their marriages. Some hadn't yet found the courage to leave, but said my story lit a tiny spark in them. I read every comment. Sometimes I laughed. Sometimes I cried. But more than anything, I realized I wasn't alone. I still have hard days. Sometimes it's the silence in the apartment at night. Sometimes it's a trip to the store, seeing something I used to buy for $2. Sometimes it's the dream where Connor is still smiling, still gentle. And I have to remind myself, it was just a dream, just an illusion. But I've learned how to move forward. I've learned how to set boundaries, how to say no, how to understand that my kindness is not something others get to exploit. And most importantly, I've learned how to love myself again. I'm no longer a money wife, no longer a woman being used without knowing. I am Natalie, a woman who lost everything and still stood tall. Maybe I don't know when I'll love again. Maybe I'll stay single for years. But this time, I'll love with eyes wide open. With eyes that have seen betrayal and still have the courage to look toward the light. I don't dream of fairy tales anymore. I just want to live honestly and live true to who I am. These days, I don't live to please anyone. I don't live to prove anything. I live to honor myself, a woman who was hurt, who trusted the wrong person but who walked away and never looked back. I didn't share this story to gain sympathy. I shared it because I know I'm not the only one. I know there are countless women out there trapped in cold marriages, false relationships, and one-sided love disguised by sweet, strategic words. And if you've read this far and see even a part of yourself in this story, please remember, you're not alone, and you don't have to suffer to be considered strong. Take a step, no matter how small. And if you ever need a place to find hope, to hear stories like this, her side of the story is always here. A place to be heard, a place to heal, and a place where we, women who've been hurt, can finally speak. Thank you for listening to my side of the story. Now, it's your turn to write your own.